I remember I was beating my meat to this video game, and then out of nowhere, my grandma walks in saying, "Bubba, what did I just buy you?" And I knew it was the biggest mistake ever. Yo, what is going on, you guys? My name's Bubba, and welcome back to another really embarrassing story. So this story all takes place back in my grade 9 year. Now, in grade 9, I was only 14 years old, and being a 14-year-old isn't easy. I will say this much: in grade 9, I was hitting puberty, and I was getting a lot of different hormones to the point where, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it was like I had my own hormone monster that made me keep falling for the temptations of life. You guys may know this because it's very common throughout, growing up and hitting puberty, especially throughout middle school. But for me, it all happened in grade 9. I remember though, back when I was in grade 9, there was a game that was very commonly played and everyone played it. You guys probably know the game. It's called Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, me, back when I was in grade 9, I wasn't allowed to get Grand Theft Auto 5 because my parents knew that it was not a game for, well, good kids to play. In a way, I guess you guys could say I had strict parents that did not want me playing games that was really not appropriate. Like, even for my parents to just buy me Call of Duty, it took so much convincing to make them understand that I wasn't gonna go out and start actually killing people IRL. Like, it was a lot of convincing I had to do just to get a basic video game that was rated M. But I remember one time I was in school hanging out with all my friends, and I remember one of my friends kept bringing up how Grand Theft Auto has these cool bank heists where you could literally go and rob banks. Now, I found this super cool, but obviously, like, I wasn't able to play because I didn't have the game. So obviously it sucked, and I remember every day they would keep talking about this game. Now, me, I only got to know stuff about Grand Theft Auto through YouTube videos that I would secretly have to watch by myself. So I would join into the conversation, but I would only be able to talk about what I knew from watching other players play it, like Vanoss and all of them. Obviously, it was really upsetting, but I remember one time specifically, I was walking home from school with my buddy of mine, and he told me, "Yo, Bubba, I don't understand, bro. Like, why don't you just, like, tell your parents it's not a bad game?" Dude, there's literally girls on the cover of the game. They're obviously not gonna believe me. Okay, well, then just get someone else to buy it for you. That's what I did, and my parents never found out. Now, this moment, when I heard about his idea, it was actually not a bad one. Like, why didn't I just get someone else to buy me the game? So I remember the next day, during the school day, I remember I walked up to one of my homies and said, "Yo, bro, you know what? I'm gonna buy the game today. I actually have a great idea." "Wait, what do you mean? Did your parents finally let you get it?" "No, obviously not, but my plan is that I'm gonna go to GameStop and just hand someone my money to buy me the game." I remember he looks at me and shrugs, and he's like, "Okay, if you say so, man. If it works, tell me." And he ended up leaving. Now, obviously, that whole day, I was excited just to go to the mall and just pick up this game. To be honest, it was like, exciting for me knowing that I could actually have a copy of this game. But once I got to the mall and I actually, waited by GameStop, I remember I saw this old guy. He had like a white beard and everything, so obviously he was old enough to buy me the game. So I walked up to him in the food court and said, "Hey, yo, bro, I was wondering, could you buy me this game? For some reason, I'm not old enough to get it, but it's a good game. My parents are just not here to pick it up for me. Is it cool if you just say you're my parent and get me the game?" I remember he looks at me and he just like, ends up saying, "Sure, why not?" And he ends up standing up and going towards GameStop with the money I handed him, and he went to go pick up the game. But for some reason, GameStop has this rule where you have to be like 17 plus to buy 17 plus mature games. So I remember right as he picks up the game, he ends up looking at the physical copy of it and like the cover and everything, and he looks at me, and then afterwards he walks towards the counter. And right when he walks towards the counter, like, this guy just kept staring at me, and then that's when the cashier noticed that this person was buying the game for me, and the cashier ended up telling the old man that was supposed to buy me the game, "Sir, you do realize this game has a lot of, violence and a lot of graphic content. You do realize this game's not for kids, right?" And at that moment, when he heard this cashier say that, instantly at that moment, he starts worrying and starts like basically like confessing his sins, saying like, "Oh, like, I was gonna buy the game for this kid. I didn't know it was a bad game. I hope I don't get in trouble." And well, one thing led to another. Mall security came and I got in trouble. I got in serious trouble to the point where they actually ended up calling my parents that I was trying to buy a game that was not for my age. Yeah, my parents found out about it and I got in serious trouble. I remember for that weekend, I wasn't allowed my Xbox nor to play my Xbox whatsoever. But then something insane happened where I remember the next day when I went to school, I ended up telling my friends like what happened and stuff. And obviously they all ended up laughing at me because, well, they all had the game that I couldn't have. And it got super annoying. But then out of nowhere throughout the school day, I ended up getting a text message from my mom. My mom ended up texting me, "Oh, Bubba, your grandma's gonna be coming to visit from the States. So she's gonna be staying with you guys for a bit while I go visit your auntie." And at that moment, I got really, really excited because if there's one person in this world that would buy me anything without questioning it, it was my grandmother. Why? Well, for one of two reasons. One, she did not speak English properly. So if the cashier did tell her, this had graphic content stuff, she would just think graphic means really cute photos. And on top of that, if she saw I wanted it bad enough, she would buy it even herself. Obviously, this is not a smart thing to do. And for anyone watching this video, even if my grandma's watching, no one should be taking advantage of other people, especially if they don't know English. Please just be smart with your decisions. Don't do what I do. But going on with the story, I remember when I got home that day, I was super excited and I ran up to my grandmother and I told her everything about this game, Grand Theft Auto. I ended up telling her how it was a racing game and how it was like, you know, basically a game where you're supposed to make money and buy nice cars. Obviously, I didn't tell her the rest of it about how, you know, you end up killing people in the game, and on top of that, you basically see women partially wearing nothing, but she didn't need to know that. So I remember that day when I told my grandma about it, she instantly just looked at me and said, okay, I'll buy you the game. And at that moment, I got super excited. I remember me and my grandma, we ended up getting into her car and we drove down to the mall. And when we got to the mall, I remember we went to the GameStop that had the game, and instantly I picked it up, I gave it to her, and me and her, we went to the front counter. Now the cashier did recognize me from before, but I did tell him that this was my grandmother and that, you know, my grandma's totally cool with me getting the game. So instantly at that moment, the cashier ends up saying the same thing that he told the old man from the other day. And well, my grandmother didn't understand a word he said, so she ends up looking at me saying, Baba, what is he saying? Oh, grandma, he's just saying how, you know, the game's a good game for kids and how, you know, it'll teach me a lot about driving. Obviously, when me and my grandma communicated, by the way, it was only in Persian, so this cashier had no idea what I was saying. But my grandma just ended up nodding her head and smiling every time the cashier said something bad about this game. And well, one thing led to another, I ended up getting a copy of Grand Theft Auto. Now, obviously, I got super happy about this and I was super excited, but this is where the story gets really intense. Because I remember that same day, I ended up going home and I ended up downloading the game, and right away at that moment, I ended up turning it on. And when I actually went into the game, one thing I started to realize was the loading screen had like this like girl on it, and then well, one thing led to another. There was also a lot more other types of content in that game, which I'm gonna say was definitely not for 14-year-old eyes. And well, of course, me being a 14-year-old that was hitting puberty, out of nowhere, one thing led to another. I got bricked. I got bricked to the point where I actually ended up going into the unicorn place. If you guys don't know what that is in GTA, then you should not be watching this video. But basically, it was a place in Grand Theft Auto where you could see inappropriate stuff. And I went in there and I ended up getting even more bricked to the point where I actually ended up taking off my pants and I started, I started beating my meat. It sounds really cringe, but honestly, it was just hormones. It's just all a part of growing up, I guess. But I remember as I was beating my meat, out of nowhere, my grandmother ends up coming downstairs to check on me. And she sees me without my pants on, bricked to a video game, and she looks at me and says, Baba, is this the game I bought you? At that moment, I freaked out and put on my pants as fast as I could, and I ended up telling my grandma, no, it's not. It was just a website. I'm sorry. I just have a lot going on. I was super nervous and did not know what to say, but luckily my grandma didn't know the difference between a computer and an Xbox, to the point where she kind of just ended up letting it go. But she did have a conversation with my parents later about how, you know, I'm growing up in a way. I don't know. It was the most awkward conversation in dinner ever. And to be honest, I lost my appetite that dinner time. But one thing was for sure, I was definitely super embarrassed about how my grandma caught me beating it to Grand Theft Auto. Like, who gets bricked over a video game? That is so weird. But at the same time, I can't be the only one, right? If you guys never got bricked during a video game, then just fall for more embarrassing stories just like this one. Peace out, guys.